Okay, understood, the chief said. Commissioner Busky was not alone on his trip to Las Vegas last year. He is having an affair, and he took his lover with him. The chief's eyes opened a little bigger. Really? I met with his lover last night and managed to get some information. You didn't try to coerce or blackmail information from this person, did you? No, sir. It just sort of came out in conversation, I said. I'll bet it did, the chief said with a sly smile. From the expense report and receipts turned in by the Commissioner Busky for the Vegas trip, I was able to determine that the commissioner had taken someone with him on the trip, and I later discovered that it was not his wife. In examining his expense report, I found that everything he claimed was allowed, and I noted that he had paid expenses that were not allowed out of his own pocket. What I found out last night was that his pockets were full of CSE money. My source let it slip that CSE gave the commissioner $10,000 to gamble with, got him 2 tickets each for 3 of the top shows in Vegas, and paid to have his airline tickets upgraded to first class. Well, that is what I know, but I can't prove any of it at this time. I only have one witness that can corroborate this, and I can't be sure that he would agree to testify. Did you say he? Yes, sir. So you can see what a mess this would be if we tried to get an indictment based on the evidence we have. The whole thing would probably get thrown out of court. The chief said, "You're right. We don't want to stir up a mess like that if we have no hope of a conviction. I just worry that the FBI is watching us to see how we handle this. It probably looks to them as though we aren't doing anything." Well, I wonder what the FBI is doing, I said. CSC is not just a Brodericksburg problem. By the way, you may want to keep an eye on Captain Ross too. I don't know how he ties into this, but I get the impression that he is worried that I might be investigating the commissioner, but I don't know how he could know. I have been extremely careful. I have left no notes where he might have seen them, and I haven't said a word to anyone about what I am doing, except you, of course. One possibility I am considering is that my source mentioned our conversation to the commissioner, and he may have said something to Ross, although I don't know why Ross would be involved with Commissioner Busky. You never mentioned any of this to Carrie? No, sir. I would trust her, but I would never have put her into a situation where she could compromise either my investigation or one of the law firm's clients. Busky happens to be a client of Richard Mitchell's. I'll keep an eye on Captain Ross, and you just keep digging. For 2 weeks, I kept myself busy with my usual routines at work and managed to put in some time working on the CSC/Commissioner Busky conundrum. I tried to act as if I didn't notice that Captain Ross was dropping by my cubicle more often than ever before, but I was careful to make sure that he never saw me working on anything connected to my investigation of Commissioner Busky. On Sunday, August 7th, I was out playing volleyball with several of the other residents of the Riverview apartments. We had 4 teams, and we rotate games so that no team played more than 2 games in a row. During one of the breaks, I went up to my apartment to use the bathroom and get a cold drink. I had just retrieved a bottle of water from the refrigerator when the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Carrie. I couldn't imagine what she would be calling about. She is the one who got a restraining order against me so that I wouldn't call her. I thought for a moment about not answering, but I couldn't ignore the call. "How are you, Brian?" "I'm getting by," I said. "How's work?" "Okay." I felt that she was trying to build up to something that she wanted to say but was afraid to say it. To me, that could only be bad news. Was she going to tell me she wanted a divorce, or that she had met someone new? "How are things at your job?" I asked because I didn't know what else to say. "Very busy." "Listen, Carrie, I know you didn't call to just ask me how I am. Whatever it is you want to say to me, it would be easier for both of us if you just said it." "You're wrong. I did just call to see how you are. It's been more than 2 weeks since we last spoke to each other." "Well, that was your choice. In case you have forgotten, it was you that took out a restraining order against me." "I haven't forgotten. You didn't give me any choice. You were stalking me. I saw you watching the house, and I saw you sitting outside my office. You were calling me all the time, and I couldn't get you to stop. I didn't want to do that, but I had to. So, I am stalking my wife. Thanks a lot." "I didn't mean for the restraining order to end all contact between us," Carrie said. "I probably should have called you sooner, but I knew you would be angry, and I didn't want to deal with that, and I was thinking that maybe we could get together once a week and talk." "Oh, really? That is so nice of you. How about this evening?" "I can't do it tonight. I have to work. I'm sorry." "Oh, even though it's Sunday, you have work tonight?" "I have to meet with a client." I felt the anger coming back. A legal aid has a meeting with a client on a Sunday night, and since when did she have clients? I didn't ask the questions that I had in my head because I didn't want to start an argument. "Can we meet tomorrow after work, dinner?" "I'd like that. How about 7 o'clock at Donahue's?" I asked. "That sounds great," she said, and then after a short hesitation, "I miss you." I hung up and did not say a word. After the call, I was uneasy about her meeting with a client that night. I tried to push that concern out of my mind and headed back to the volleyball court. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the volleyball games broke up. My mind was drifting back to Carrie's phone call as I walked up the stairs to my apartment. Her call had lifted my spirits a little, but I would have been much happier if it weren't for the meeting she was going to that night. Was it really a business meeting? If it weren't, why would she even mention it to me? I grabbed a bottle of cold water and held it against my forehead as I walked to the bathroom. I peeled off my sweat-soaked t-shirt and shorts and climbed into the shower. I was shampooing my hair when I heard the phone ringing in the living room. I was going to let the answering machine pick up the call, but then thought it might be Carrie calling, so I jumped out of the shower and left a trail of water all the way to the phone. "LT Hobbs," the familiar female voice said. "What do you want now?" "I just thought you would like to know who your wife has been seeing. Why are you doing this? Why do you care what my wife does?" "I don't like her, and I don't like what she is doing to you," she said. "And just what is she doing to me?" "She is making a fool out of you." I didn't respond to that comment. I just waited to see what she would say next as I looked at the display on my phone for the caller ID information. Unknown caller. "Your wife is meeting her friend tonight. Would you like to know where?" I wanted to tell this woman to go to hell. "Where?" "They are meeting at 207 Munt Street at 9 o'clock. I really think you should be there to confront them," she said. "How do you know this?" I keep my ears opened. Carrie and I are already separated, so why should I care what she does now? I cared, but I didn't want the caller to know that. "Don't you want to catch her in the act? Put an end to all her lies?" Again, I didn't respond. "Well, it's up to you. Go or don't go. I think you will go because you want to know the truth, don't you? Bye-bye." The line went dead, but I couldn't put the phone down. Who was this woman, and how did she always seem to know where Carrie was going to be? I had begun to convince myself that Carrie hadn't done anything wrong, and that one phone call brought all of my doubts back to me. I was going to have to go to 207 Munt Street to find the truth. After putting the phone down, I decided to take a drive by the house on Munt Street to get the lay of the land. I was familiar with Munt Street because I grew up near there, but I wasn't sure enough of the numbering to know which house was number 207. Munt Street was about 3 miles long, running from 5th Street on the west and ending at River Road on the east. I knew that the houses were numbered from east to west, so that 207 would be close to the River Road end of the street. I cut through town and headed south on River Road, which climbed a steep hill up away from the river just before intersecting Munt Street at the top of that hill. I hadn't been on Munt Street in years, but as soon as I turned off River Road, it all looked familiar to me. As a kid growing up on 5th Street south of Munt, I used to walk down Munt Street to River Road and then climb down the steep riverbank to go fishing in the Delaware River. Munt Street is kind of the dividing line between the more urban parts of Brodericksburg to the north and the more rural part of the city to the south. The houses on Munt Street are spread far apart on very large lots. Most of the homes dated back to the 30s or early 40s and had been small farms at one time. On the southwest corner of Munt and River Road, there is an abandoned house, the yard overgrown with weeds and bushes. Nobody had lived in the house in at least 5 years, and maybe more. I remembered that when I used to walk by the house to go fishing, there was always an old man sitting on the porch, and he would wave to me and yell, "Catch a big one." On the right side of the road was a very large wooded area. I always wondered why no one did anything with that land. Munt Street goes downhill for the first quarter mile and then flattens out as it crosses what used to be the J&J Railroad. J&J went out of business and the trains stopped running in the late 50s. The tracks were still there when I was a kid in the 70s. They tore the tracks up in 1987. That was when Hanratty and I and 2 of our friends carried off the old railroad ties and built our cabin in the woods behind the Bolin property. The cabin stood for about 2 years before someone tore it down. When I got to the bottom of the hill, I looked to the south down the old railbed. Although covered with tall weeds and small trees, it was still easy to see where the J&J Railroad had been. It was a wide, flat trail going straight south. The J&J Railroad used to run from Brodericksburg south 30 miles and connected to the main line going into Philadelphia. As kids, Hanratty and I had walked at least 10 miles south along the old railbed. How much of the railbed was left? I had no idea. On the north side of the street, a small portion of the old railbed had been paved over. The pavement went about 15 yards north along the railbed and stopped, and beyond that was a wooden fence. It looked as though the city had planned to put a road in there, but then changed their minds. After crossing the old railbed, the street climbed uphill for about 100 yards. At the top of the hill on the left side of the street was the first house with a Munt Street address. It was 207. I drove by the house slowly. It was typical of the houses built in the area in the 40s. It was a 2-story white clapboard house. The house was about 30 feet wide and 40 feet deep and sat about 30 feet back from the road. The door was on the left side of the front of the house. I had been in enough of these houses to know what they looked like. Inside the front door, you would find a small foyer. Straight ahead would be the stairs to the second floor, and to the right would be the living room. Behind the living room was the dining room, and behind that was the kitchen. Off the back of the kitchen would be a bathroom. When these houses were built, they didn't have a bathroom in the house. When indoor bathrooms were added, they were built off the back of the kitchen because that is where the water pipes and drains were located. Upstairs, there would be 3 small bedrooms, one behind the other. As I passed the house, I saw that the driveway was on the west side of the house and ran from the street all the way back to a dilapidated old garage. There was a 2 or 3-year-old Ford Ranger parked in front of the garage. Off to the left of the garage, standing by itself, I could see the old outhouse. It's surprising how many of these old outhouses are still standing. The next house on Munt Street was 100 yards past 207 and was also on the left side of the street. I continued down Munt until I reached the first cross street, and then I turned around. On my second pass, I noticed something I had missed the first time. There was a for sale by owner sign in the yard. Judging by how tall the weeds growing around the sign were, I figured the house must have been on the market for a couple of months at least. If I were going to spy on Carrie during her visit to the house, I would have to find a way to get close enough that I would be able to peek in the windows. I had to stop and think about my options and come up with a plan. I drove down to the bottom of the hill and turned left into the paved portion of the rail bed on the north side of the street and swung the car around so I was facing south. Approaching the house from the west was out. There was no cover on that side of the house, and I would be exposed. The neighbor in the next house down the road would be able to see me. Another problem with the west side of the house was that there were no windows close enough to the ground that I would be able to see in. I would need a ladder to see anything on that side of the house. The east side of the house would be easy to approach. There was plenty of cover on the hillside, and then, about 20 feet from the house, there was a hedgerow that was about 4 feet tall and ran the length of the house. I could easily hide behind the hedgerow and then get closer to the house if necessary. The next problem was, where would I leave my car? I thought about parking right where I was, on the paved portion of the rail bed. I quickly ruled that out. The car would be completely exposed, and I couldn't chance Carrie spotting my car or having a patrol car drive by and see it. There was no safe place for me to park on River Road or Munt Street. I was staring straight ahead when the idea hit me. Grayson Road was about 3 miles south. I could park down there and walk back along the old rail bed. That might work if I could get the car far enough off Grayson Road so that it would not be noticed. I put the car in gear and turned left onto Munt Street and then turned right on River Road. A few minutes later, I spotted the street sign for Grayson Road, and as I approached the turn, I looked to my right and felt a knot in my stomach as I looked at the Boland house. I still couldn't get the feeling that I hadn't done enough to get justice for Mr. Boland. In my heart, I still didn't believe that he had killed himself. It still bothered me as I made the right turn onto Grayson. There were deep woods on both sides of Grayson Road, and the canopy created by the trees made it nearly impossible to see anything except what was straight ahead of you when you drove down the road on a summer night. All I would need was a place to get my car off the road far enough so that it wouldn't be picked up by the headlights of a passing car. I found what I needed just before reaching the rail bed. It was a break in the trees on the right side of the road. It looked like a farm road, probably leading into the fields behind the Boland house. I turned in and drove about 50 feet and found that the little dirt trail opened into a large field. It was just what I needed. I could pull in there and hide the car from sight even during daylight hours. I turned around and drove back out onto Grayson and found the rail bed just another 25 yards down the road. My plan was set, so I drove back to my apartment to get ready. Back in my apartment, I fixed myself a sandwich and made my final plans for the evening. I remembered from my experiences in the woods as a teenager that I was going to have to deal with mosquitoes. This meant that I would have to wear long pants and a long sleeve shirt and use mosquito repellent. I needed to wear something dark, so I chose my navy blue warm-ups. They were lightweight but would still be uncomfortable in the heat of an August night. I got a pair of dark socks and black running shoes out of my closet. To the pile of clothes I had gathered, I added a black ball cap, a flashlight, a fanny pack, a pair of field glasses, and my digital camera. I figured the distance from Grayson Road to Munt Street to be no more than 3 miles. Normally, I could easily walk 3 miles in 45 minutes, but I didn't know how difficult the walk would be. The rail bed was straight and flat, but I was sure that a lot of it would be overgrown with weeds and brush. I decided to allow myself an hour and a half to walk from Grayson Road to Munt Street. I left the apartment at 7:10 p.m. dressed in black jogging shorts and a black t-shirt. The rest of my things, including 3 bottles of water, I put in my backpack. To anyone watching me leave my apartment, it would look like I was on my way to the gym. 15 minutes later, I pulled off of Grayson onto the tractor trail I had found earlier and parked my car out of sight of the road. I left the car running with the air conditioner on while I put on my warm-up suit and pulled on the black socks and laced up my black running shoes. The last thing I did before getting out of the car was to apply the Avon skin cream Carrie had given me for golf. She told me it was better than mosquito repellent, and I found that she was right. The stuff really kept the bugs away. I rubbed it on my face, neck, and hands. Then I shut off the car and got out. I strapped on my fanny pack, which held my camera, field glasses, flashlight, and 3 bottles of water, and headed back out to Grayson Road. As I came out of the woods, I was careful to make sure there were no cars coming, and then I jogged down to the rail bed and turned north. I was pleasantly surprised that the path wasn't more overgrown than it was. Being daylight helped, but the weeds weren't difficult to walk through, and there weren't that many trees on the bed itself. I guess that whatever J&J Railroad had used to keep weeds down along the rail line nearly 50 years earlier was still helping to keep the weeds down. It was only 8:30 and just starting to get dark when I was close enough to see the house on Munt Street. I was still nearly a quarter of a mile away, but I stopped there to wait until it got a little darker. I sat and watched the house while I drank a bottle of water. By 8:45, I felt that it was safe for me to move closer, so I continued down the rail bed until I was below the house and about 20 yards from Munt Street. The lights on the first floor of the house were on, and the light over the front door was on. I used the field glasses to check to make sure no one was walking around outside the house before I started to climb up the steep hill toward the house. There was a ditch about 4 feet deep near to the rail bed that I had to cross before I could start my way up the hill. The ditch was wide, so I had to climb partway down into it and then jump across to the other side. When I came up out of the ditch, I was about 85 yards from the house. I was far enough away from the house, and it was dark enough by then that I was able to move freely up the hill. There was a large growth of sumac about 10 yards short of the hedgerow. I sat down behind the clump of trees to wait. I had a better view of the front door from where I was than I would have if I moved forward to the hedgerow. I planned to wait there until I was sure that Carrie was in the house, and then I would move in closer. I had been close enough to watch the street and the house for almost 35 minutes, and I had not seen even one car pass on Munt Street. It was 9:05 when I finally heard a car approaching from the west. When the car turned into the driveway, I could see that it was Carrie's car. Up until that moment, I had been holding out hope that the caller had lied to me. My stomach was full of butterflies, and I felt a cold chill in spite of the warm evening. My emotional condition worsened with each passing moment as I waited to see Carrie enter the house. From my position behind the sumac trees, I could only see Carrie's head and shoulders as she approached the front door. Carrie knocked on the door, and it was opened just seconds later. I could hear voices, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. A moment later, Carrie was in the house, and the door was closed. I told myself it was time to move closer to the house to see what was going on inside, but I couldn't make myself move. A sudden, very strong, foreboding feeling came over me. I came there to find out the truth, but something was telling me to leave. I sat frozen for a minute, unable to make a decision about what to do. Finally, I told myself that I had come there to get some answers, and it was time to do that. But just as I started to get up, I heard a car turning off River Road onto Munt. I stayed low and turned to look at the car. It was a Brodericksburg black and white. My whole body suddenly felt cold as I watched the patrol car slow down as it crossed the rail bed and start up the hill. The black and white was halfway up the hill when I saw a flash of light swing over my head. I looked back toward the house just in time to see another black and white turning into the driveway. As the second patrol car pulled to a stop, he turned on his light bar, and the first car did the same a moment later. The first car had stopped just short of the top of the hill and started playing his searchlight along the side of the house. At that point, I got control of my body again and started sliding backward down the hill, staying as low as possible. I watched as 2 officers got out of the car in the driveway. One of them went to the front door, and the other headed around to the back of the house. None of the officers seemed to be looking in my direction yet, so I kept moving as fast as I could down the hill. Suddenly, I saw the search sweep across the tops of the weeds I was crawling through. I stopped moving and hoped that they hadn't seen the weeds moving. The light made several passes over the area where I was hiding. All I could think about was the disaster that was about to befall me. If I got caught, I would be charged with trespassing, prowling, peeping, and violating Carrie's restraining order. My marriage and my career would be toast. I just had to get away. When the light beam finally moved away, I started moving downhill again. I must have been halfway down the hill when I stopped and dared to lift my head to look up toward the house. Both patrol cars were now in the driveway. I could see that one of the officers was talking to someone at the front door of the house, and 2 others were walking around to the west side of the house with flashlights and guns drawn. The 4th officer was still in the car, now sweeping the searchlight along the hedgerow and toward the backyard. No one seemed to be looking in my direction, so I stood partway up and began running down the hill. I kept waiting to hear one of the officers shouting at me to stop, but it didn't happen. I could see the flat rail bed just 15 yards away. I stood up straight and ran as fast as I could. It wasn't until I saw the drainage ditch that I remembered that it was there. I was moving too fast to try to stop, so I jumped. I don't know if I jumped too soon or the ditch was just too wide, but I landed halfway down the far side of the ditch. When I hit the ground, I felt my right ankle twist, and the pain was instant. I almost shouted. I had to put my hand over my mouth and lay still against the side of the ditch until the pain subsided a little. One benefit of my position was that I could see the activity around the house, but they could not see me. I managed to get my breathing under control, and I started to crawl up the side of the ditch. Every time I moved my right leg, it felt like someone was stabbing my ankle with a red-hot poker. When I reached the flat surface of the rail bed, I lay there on my back for a while. The fear of being caught was being replaced by the fear that I wouldn't be able to get back to my car. I turned my fanny pack around so that I could open it. I got a bottle of water out and then looked to see if the small first aid kit that I usually carried was still in the bag. It was there. I don't know what I thought I would find in the kit that would help, but I looked anyway. I found Band-Aids, a needle and thread, and 2 packets of ibuprofen. I took all 4 tablets and finished the bottle of water. I put the empty bottle back in the pack. I didn't want to leave anything behind. I untied my right shoe and pulled the laces as tight as I could and retied it. Finally, I gave myself a little pep talk and prepared myself for the pain as I stood up. The pain wasn't nearly as bad as I expected until I tried to put weight on it. Once again, I almost screamed. I managed to start walking in spite of the pain. I was moving very slowly, and I was worried that I might pass out, but I kept going. After about 10 minutes, it wasn't as bad. I don't know if my body had just become numb to it, or if the ibuprofen had helped. Maybe it was a bit of both. It still hurt like hell, but I was able to walk. I wanted to sit down and rest about every 5 minutes, but I knew if I did, I would have a hard time getting started again. I had to just keep moving. The weeds and small trees that had not been a problem while walking toward Munt Street were a big problem on the way back. I could only use my flashlight where it wouldn't be seen from the houses I was walking behind, so I frequently stepped on the side of a tree trunk with my right foot, causing pain to shoot through my body like an electrical shock. It took me almost 3 hours to walk back to my car. When I climbed in and closed the door, I began to cry. I had never endured that much pain for that long a period of time before. The last 3 hours were like the worst nightmare of my life. But now I had another challenge: trying to drive the car. I discovered a way to do it without using my right foot. I used cruise control to accelerate and maintain my speed, and used my left foot for braking. I had to go slow and avoid the main roads where I might encounter a patrol car, but I made it home. The next obstacle was to climb 2 long flights of stairs to get up to my apartment. I wished that I could just sleep in the car, but I knew I had to get up those stairs. I left the fanny pack in the car and hobbled over to the stairs. The hot poker was back with each step. I kept looking around hoping no one would see me, and when I got to the stairs, I sat down on the second step. Then, using my left leg and my hands, I was able to move backward up the stairs 1 step at a time. I was drenched with sweat by the time I reached the top step. From there, I literally crawled to my apartment door. Just being inside my apartment with the door closed made me feel better. I got back up on my feet, or rather my left foot, and I hopped into the kitchen. I got a plastic dishpan out from under the sink and emptied the contents of the ice maker in my freezer into the pan, saving 5 ice cubes and putting them in a glass. I spent the next hour with my right foot on ice while I sipped scotch. I crawled into bed just after 2:30 a.m. I don't know how I managed to sleep at all with the pain in my ankle, because it was that pain that finally woke me up at 6:30 a.m. I got up and hopped out to the kitchen and put the coffee on, and I even managed to take a shower. I was on my second cup of coffee when I picked up the phone and called Hanratty. Hello? It was a woman who answered the phone. The voice was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I am trying to get a hold of Richard Hanratty, I said. Rich is in the shower, Brian. Linda? Apparently Linda had spent the night with Hanratty. I didn't realize that they had moved that far in their relationship. Yep. Huh. Tell him to call me when he gets out of the shower, please, I said. Okay, I'll tell him. Thanks. 15 minutes later, Hanratty called me. What's up? You're asking me what's up? I said. You've been holding out on me. Since when does Linda spend the night? It's been about a month. Why didn't you say anything? I felt guilty. I didn't want to brag about my love life when you were having problems with Carrie. I appreciate that, but you don't have to dance around me. I am happy for you. Thanks. So what can I do for you? I need you to pick me up at my apartment as soon as you can. I said. Okay. I can be there in 15 minutes. What's up? I'll tell you when you get here. Just come up to the apartment. The door will be unlocked. He was there in 10 minutes. Jesus, What did you do to yourself? I twisted my ankle yesterday. How? I must have done it playing volleyball, I said. I hated lying to Hanratty, but I couldn't tell anyone what really happened. Why didn't you call yesterday? It wasn't this bad yesterday, but it seems to have gotten a lot worse overnight. I need you to help me get downstairs and then drive me to the emergency room so I can have this checked out. Does Carrie know about this? No, and I would rather she didn't. She won't hear it from me, Hanratty said. I was lucky. The emergency room was just about empty when we got there. They took me right away. The x-ray was negative. No broken bones, just a very bad sprain. The doctor told me to go back home and keep ice on it for the rest of the day, and then I could use heat after that. He gave me a prescription for an anti-inflammatory and told me to get a pair of crutches. Hanratty took me to the drugstore to fill the prescription and pick up the crutches I needed. Afterward, Hanratty wanted to take me back to my apartment, but I made him take me to the station. The first thing I did was go over to Sergeant McKinstry. He looked me up and down and smiled at me. Christ, you'll do anything to get out of playing basketball against us, he said. Don't worry, Mike. I'll be ready before basketball season starts. You got last night's sheet? Right here. I took the overnight activity report back to my desk and sat down. I had already told Hanratty to hit the streets and make the run past the schools. I told him I was just going to finish up some paperwork and go back home. I took a quick look toward Captain Ross' office, but he was not in. A-hole, I said to myself. It was on the second page of the activity report. 8:57 p.m. Report of a prowler outside 207 Munt Street. Report called in by a passing motorist. 2 cars dispatched and arrived on scene at 9:07 p.m. Prowler not found at scene. Occupants of the house were unaware of any problem. Incident closed at 9:20 p.m. Apparently I was in the clear. I found it strange that the report said that the call came from a passing motorist. I saw no cars other than Carrie's for more than 30 minutes before the 2 black and whites showed up. Was that a mistake? Unfortunately, I couldn't go asking any questions about the call. There was only one thing I could do about it. I told McKinstry that I was going home and asked him to mark me out as ill. Then I went down to the garage and picked up my unmarked car. Using the same technique I did the night before with my own car, I managed to drive myself out to 207 Munt Street. The Ford Ranger was parked in the same place that had been Sunday afternoon. I found that it was almost as difficult to get the crutches out of the car as it was to get myself out of the car. After wrestling with the damn things for a few minutes, I did manage to free them from the back seat. On my way to the door, I noticed the "For Sale by Owner" sign was gone. I only had to wait a short time for someone to answer my knock on the door. The man that opened the door was about 5'7" and maybe 155 pounds. He had silver hair that was cut short and was wearing Levis and a t-shirt. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I am Lieutenant Hobbs of the Brodericksburg Police Department, and you are?" "Nice to meet you, Lieutenant. I'm Frank Izzo." We shook hands. "Mr. Izzo, I am here to follow up on the report of a prowler on your property we got last night." "This is your property, isn't it?" "Yes, this is mine, but I really don't know what to tell you. I never saw the prowler, and the officers that came last night didn't find one either." "So you don't know who placed the call?" "No, I have no idea. I thought possibly one of your neighbors may have called it in and may have mentioned it to you today. I would really like to get a description of the prowler if I could. If it was one of my neighbors, they haven't said anything to me about it. If anyone mentions it, I can tell them to call you." "That would be very helpful," I said, and pulled a business card from my wallet and handed it to him. "The officers that responded last night said that there was someone else in the house with you. Was that person also a resident of this house?" "Oh, no. It was actually 2 other people," he said. "The woman, I think her first name was Carrie, but I don't remember her last name. She was here when the police arrived, and then Mr. Farlow arrived a few minutes later while the police were still here." "Stephen Farlow, the real estate agent?" I asked. "Yes. Did you sell this house?" "Sort of. That's what they were here for last night." "Why was the woman here?" "She was a legal aid from the law firm handling this deal. I wanted to keep this guy talking in hopes of picking up some more good information. Knowing that Carrie was there for work made me feel a lot better, while at the same time making me feel pretty stupid for putting myself through all that pain for no good reason. You know, I passed here a few days ago and saw the for sale sign out front. I was thinking of stopping by for a look. I'm in a small apartment right now, and this would have worked nicely for me. Can I ask what you got for the place?" "It's not actually sold yet. Mr. Farlow put an option to buy on the house for a client of his." "Option to buy?" "Yeah, I never heard of that before either. I was trying to sell the place for $320,000. Mr. Farlow offered to give me $5,000 to take the house off the market for 3 months, and then his client would either buy the place for an addition $315,000, or I could keep the $5,000 and put the house back on the market. I wasn't in that big a hurry to sell anyway, so I took the offer. Last night I signed the papers, and they gave me a check for the $5,000. I am actually not supposed to discuss this with anyone, or I could nix the deal. I figured that since you're a cop, it would be okay to tell you. I won't mention our conversation. Sounds like a good deal for you, though. How much land is involved? I asked. It's 30 acres. I own from the corner of Munt Street and River Road to about 150 feet the other side of the house, and the rear of the property goes back almost 1,000 feet. You own the abandoned house up there? I said as I pointed toward the house on the southwest corner of Munt and River Road. Yeah, that was my dad's house. I inherited it when he passed away about 10 years ago. The house wasn't worth fixing up, so I let it go. I suppose the client that's interested in this property wants to develop it. Well, good luck with that. This isn't much good for development. What do you mean? Don't you know the story about that developer? What was his name? George Kasparek. That's it. I still have a pretty good memory. I never heard of George Kasparek, I said. He's the guy that bought all that land across the street. There's about 250 acres in there. He planned to build about 200 high-end houses, all brick or stone, 4,000 square feet or more in each on at least half an acre wooded lot. He had all the permits and was ready to start building. He's the guy that paved that piece of the old J&J railroad bed. That was going to be the main entrance to his subdivision. He was going to put up a big stone wall along Munt Street, and at the entrance, in gold letters, it would say, The Woods, a George Kasparek development. That was in 1999. That was before I moved back here. What happened? The J&J Railroad. Do you know the history behind the J&J? No. I remember the rails being there when I was a kid, but I really never knew much about it, other than it was a passenger service from Brodericksburg to Philadelphia. The train ran through our property, so I remember it quite well. It started back in the late 30s. I wasn't born yet, but my father lived in that house up there back then. I was born in that house. We owned this property back then, before the J&J ran through it. When Franklin Roosevelt started the National Recovery Administration, or NRA, one of their projects was to improve rail connections between large cities and the smaller communities around them. To interest the railroads in participating, the federal government said that they would purchase a 250-foot wide right-of-way for the rail beds and lease the land for $1 a year to anyone that would build and run the railway. Once the rail line was built, the company operating the line could use the approximately 100 feet of land on each side of the railroad for whatever they wanted to do. None of the big railroads were interested in building a line from Brodericksburg to Philly, so J&J stepped in. Their railroad experience prior to that was building rails for coal mines. With WPA workers and government assistance, J&J was able to get the J&J Railroad built and running in 2 years. They did all right for a while, but in the 50s, Pennsylvania Railroad saw an opportunity to make money on the passenger traffic between Brodericksburg and Philly. The Pennsylvania Railroad already had tracks that came into Brodericksburg from back when the steel mill was still in operation. All they had to do was build a station and start running trains. Pennsylvania Railroad had the added advantage that they ran their passengers all the way into the city. J&J passengers had to change trains when they got to the main line, so it wasn't long before J&J was in financial trouble. In the end, they just walked away from the business in 1956. That brings us up to George Kasparek's problem. Like I said, he was all ready to start building and had already started putting the road in so he could get the heavy equipment in there. That's when one of his lawyers found the problem with the title to the land Kasparek was about to build on. Everyone kind of assumed that the 250-foot railroad right-of-way reverted back to the original owners when J&J went belly up. What the lawyer found out was that in the lease agreement J&J signed with the NRA, there was a clause that stated that if the operator were to suspend operation of the railroad or go out of business, the 250-foot right-of-way became the property of the NRA. Since making that discovery, Kasparek and his lawyers have been trying to find out what department of the federal government now owns the land since NRA no longer exists. I read somewhere that the property owned by the NRA was now under the Department of the Interior and controlled by the people who run our national parks. If that's the case, they will never get that land because you cannot buy parkland from the Department of the Interior. Kasparek's lawyer seems to think it would be easy to get the government to move the land into a different department, and then they could sell it. Kasparek's lawyer has been trying to find someone in the government that can help him ever since. I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for those bureaucrats in Washington to do anything. So the woods is still the woods, only there ain't no houses over there, Mr. Izzo concluded. Does kind of make you wonder why anyone would want this land when there is a big hole in the middle of it, I said. That's what I was thinking too. They didn't tell me who their client was or why he is interested in this land, so I didn't mention the J&J factor, Mr. Izzo said. On the drive home, I was thinking about a lot of little pieces of information that were starting to form patterns, but the patterns weren't clear enough to make any sense yet, and I wasn't sure that they were of any importance. What did all this have to do with someone trying to destroy my marriage, or how I was going to prove that Commissioner Busky was taking bribes or kickbacks from CSE? By the time I got back into the apartment, my ankle was throbbing. I took one of the pills the doctor prescribed and put some ice in a plastic bag and strapped it to my ankle with an elastic bandage. Then I called the law offices of Mitchell and Horn and spoke to the receptionist and told her to ask Carrie to call me. I could have called her direct line, but because of the restraining order, I was playing it very carefully. It was less than 5 minutes later that Carrie called me back. You wanted to talk to me? Yeah. I need to cancel our dinner tonight. Really, why? Something came up and I have to take care of it tonight. You're not doing this to get even with me for the restraining order, are you? No, just like you have work on Sunday, I have some word too. When can we get together? I don't know. Can I call you tonight around 8? Okay, I said. I followed the doctor's instructions for the rest of the day, taking my medication and keeping ice on my foot. At 5:30 that afternoon, Hanratty called me. How's the ankle? Hanratty asked. Still hurts like a son of a bitch. What did you plan to do about your dinner? I got a pizza in the freezer. I'll just heat that up, I said. You want me to pick you up in the morning? No, I drove myself home today, so I think I can get myself to the station in the morning. At 7 o'clock, I was trying to get the plastic wrap off my frozen pizza when someone knocked on my door. I'll be right there, I called as I picked up one of my crutches and painfully made my way to the door. When I opened the door, I was shocked to find Carrie standing there, holding a couple of grocery bags. Carrie? Why didn't you tell me about your ankle? She asked. Before I could respond to her question, Carrie moved past me and walked over to my dining table and began to empty the grocery bags onto the table. What are you doing here? Carrie looked at me for a moment and then said, Well, you couldn't come out for dinner, so I brought dinner to you. I would have cooked the dinner myself, but I didn't find out about your injury until 6 o'clock. I have a roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a nice bottle of wine. Now, where can I find dinner plates and wine glasses? In the cupboard, next to the refrigerator. I stood and watched as Carrie started putting the food on plates she found in one of the cupboard. You still didn't answer me. Why didn't you tell me about your ankle? Because I knew what you would do. Oh, and just what did you think I would do? Exactly what you were doing right now. What do you mean? I knew that you would feel sorry for me and want to come over and take care of me, I said. Who told you? Is that important? Hanratty is the only one who knew about my ankle, and I told him not to tell you. Rich didn't tell me. Linda did. I didn't think to tell him not to tell Linda. If you really don't want me here, I'll leave, Carrie said. Walking away from me was your decision. Staying would be yours as well, I said. I still don't understand why you didn't want me to know that you injured your ankle. I knew you would feel sorry for me. I want you to be with me because you want to be with me, not because you feel sorry for me. Carrie had finished serving out the food and turned to look at me. I do feel sorry for you and want to take care of you, but that's because I care about you. We aren't apart because I don't love you anymore. The reason we are separated and not divorced is because I do still love you, and I know you still love me. I just can't be with you when you don't trust me. All of the fighting was breaking my heart. I want us to be back together, but I am not going to rush things just because you hurt your ankle. I want to help you, but it doesn't mean I am going to ask you to come home yet. For the first time since she asked me to move out, I really understood why she had done it, and I knew she was right. I was starting to understand the truth. It just didn't all make sense yet. Carrie and I ate the dinner she had brought and then sat and talked like we did before the trouble started. Carrie didn't leave until almost 10 o'clock that night, and on her way out she kissed me, said that she would call me the next night, and then said that she was free Thursday night. She suggested that she would come over and make dinner for us at my apartment. My ankle hadn't improved much overnight. My morning routines took much longer than usual, so I didn't get to the station until almost 8:30 a.m. I was pulling into the parking lot when I saw Agent Van Horn leaving the building. He never even looked in my direction as he got into his car and drove away. I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, and as I walked through the bay, I saw Hanratty sitting in Captain Ross' office. I thought to myself, what the hell is Hanratty talking to Ross about? Rather than going to my desk, I went straight to Chief Pasiak's office. When he saw me standing at his door, he motioned me in. Sit down, Brian. I sat down in front of his desk. How's the ankle? It hurts. Shouldn't you be home resting it? Is that what you would do? I asked. The chief smiled at me. No. I saw Agent Van Horn in the parking lot. What did he want? I asked. He was just sniffing around to see if we were investigating Commissioner Busky. What did you tell him? I told him that I had my best man on it, and we were making slow progress, the chief said. Then I asked him how the FBI's case against CSC was going. Agent Van Horn didn't want to discuss that. Figures. Have there been any new developments? The chief asked. Nothing new. I am thinking that we may have to use his lover to nail him. What did you have in mind? I am guessing that the commissioner will probably go to the Automotive Aftermarket Products Expo again this October. If he does, and if he takes his lover with him, I was thinking I might be able to convince his lover to wear a wire, I said. How will we justify the wire? I don't think we have enough evidence to get a warrant. I'm still working on that, sir. Back at my desk, I found a note from Hanratty. I am hitting the street with Captain Ross. If you get out of your secret meeting with the chief in time, you can meet us at DD's. The note gave me the impression that Hanratty was bothered by my private meetings with Chief Pasiak. I could understand that, but Hanratty becoming friendly with Ross bothered me. Hanratty never liked Ross, so why was he going for coffee with him? I didn't know if Ross was involved with Commissioner Busky in any way, but I had some suspicions about it. I began to wonder if Ross was trying to recruit Hanratty to spy on me. If that were the case, it would mean that Ross knew that I was investigating the commissioner, but how could he know that? Chief Pasiak and I were the only ones that knew. It wasn't as if it were an active investigation. One person, slowly working the investigation for over 6 months, being careful not to arouse anyone's interest, but somehow Captain Ross seemed to know what I was up to. I thought about that for over an hour, but I couldn't come to any conclusion, so I moved on. Ever since I had passed by the Boland house on my way to Grayson Road Sunday evening, I had it in my mind that I should give Mrs. Boland a call and let her know that I hadn't forgotten about her. I pulled out my notes on the Boland case and found the phone number. I called the number and got a message that the number I was calling was no longer in service. That got my interest. I went back through my notes again and found the number in Philadelphia for Mrs. Boland's daughter. Mrs. Turner, this is Lieutenant Hobbs of the Brodericksburg Police Department. I was trying to reach your mother. Do you have a number where I can reach her? What is this in reference to? Mrs. Turner asked. I wanted to speak to her about your father. Have you found out who killed him? She asked. I am sorry. No. I haven't found out anything new, but I wanted to talk to your mother and let her know that I haven't forgotten about the case. Just a minute, Mrs. Turner said. She must have put her hand over the mouthpiece because I could not hear anything. Lieutenant Hobbs, what can I do for you? Mrs. Boland said. Mrs. Boland, how are you? I am fine, thank you, Lieutenant. My daughter said that you wanted to talk to me. Yes, I do. I wanted you to know that I haven't forgotten about your husband. Unfortunately, I haven't found anything new, but I haven't given up. I tried to call you at home, but was informed that your phone had been disconnected. I no longer live there, Mrs. Boland said. Did you sell the house? I asked. Not yet, but I have an offer. Back in June, someone put an option to buy on the house and property. He has until the end of November to exercise the option. Who offered the option to buy for your property? I don't know. Stephen Farlow made the offer, but said that he represented someone that wanted to remain anonymous for now. Actually, I'm not supposed to tell anyone about the deal until after November, but I thought you already knew about it. Why would you think that I already knew about it? Your wife came out to the house with Mr. Farlow to close the deal. She had all the legal papers I had to sign with her. My wife was acting as a legal aid, which means she would have violated client-attorney privilege if she had told me about the deal. I was wondering why you were asking me about something I thought you already knew about. Mrs. Boland, was Stephen Farlow the man who asked your husband if he would be interested in selling your farm? Oh, no. I would have remembered that. Don and I have known Mr. Farlow for years. When I put the phone down, I couldn't help but wonder about the 2 business deals involving options to buy land that I had discovered in the last 24 hours. Farlow Realty had handled both of the deals and Carrie handled the legal aspects of the closings on both of them. I didn't know what to make of this information. After all, there was nothing illegal about these transactions. The one thing that kept me from pushing this from my mind was something that Mrs. Boland had told me during the original investigation of her husband's death. Mrs. Boland said that before his death, Mr. Boland had received a call from someone that asked him if he would be interested in selling his farm. Could it have been the same person that now held the option to buy on the Boland and the Izzo properties? My ankle was starting to throb again, so I decided to work from home and put the heating pad on my ankle. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, I was sitting on my sofa with my right foot up on the coffee table. I had a heating blanket wrapped around my ankle. I was digging through the Brodericksburg phone directory and making a list of names and phone numbers I wanted to contact. I was just about to pick up the phone to start making calls when someone knocked on my door. Come on in. It's not locked. Hanratty walked in and said, "Someone in your condition should really keep their door locked. You never know who might just walk in." "You're right. You are living proof of that. Is that any way to treat your best friend?" "If you're my best friend, why did you tell Carrie about my ankle when I specifically asked you not to?" "I didn't tell her." "Right. Linda told her, but you told Linda, and you knew that Linda would tell her, so it amounts to the same thing," I said. "Yeah, I guess it does. Sorry, but I just thought it might help you two get back together." "Did she call you?"
No.
"She didn't?" "No. She came over here and brought dinner with her." "Really? That was a good thing, wasn't it?" "Yes. We had a nice talk. That's what Linda and I were hoping." "I supposed you expect me to thank you," I said. "You don't have to." "Good, because I am not going to." "Hey, I'm sorry about that note I left you this morning." Ross was standing there watching me. "I don't know what you were into, but whatever it is, you have Ross in a near panic," Hanratty said. "How do you mean?" "First thing this morning, he calls me into his office, acting real friendly. Said he just wanted to chat with me. The funny thing was, he was really friendly for a while. Then he asks me if you have said anything about the case you're working on for the chief. I told him I didn't know what you were doing for the chief, and he asked me if it bothers me that you're shutting me out like that. I admit that I don't like that you have to keep a secret from me, but I trust that you have a good reason for not telling me what you were up to. I wanted to see what Ross was after. I told him that it really bugged me that I couldn't get you to tell me anything. That's when Ross suggested we go out and get some coffee, and he followed me over to your desk while I wrote you that note. I assume that he wants you to spy on me?" I said. "He was a little more subtle than that. But yes, he wants me to spy on you. He said that all he wants to know is what you were working on. He feels that the chief is unfairly excluding him from important police business. What do you get in return for spying on me? He told me that he could help me make lieutenant. Then I wouldn't have to take orders from you anymore. So what are you going to do?" I asked. "Spy on you, of course. I am supposed to try and find out what you are working on and tell him." "Is that all?" "That's all. I go see him in a couple of days and tell him I haven't found out yet, but I am working on it." "How long do you think you can keep that up?" "Until you finish whatever it is you're working on. Maybe I can help you out. I am going to give you something to do without explaining why. Then in a couple of days you can tell Ross what I asked you to do, and let him try and figure out what I am up to. Will he be able to figure out what you are working on for the chief from the information I'll give him?" "No. What I am going to have you do is unrelated to the work I am doing for the chief." "Okay. What do you want me to do?" Hanratty asked. I handed him the list of names, addresses, and phone numbers, and the questions I wanted answered. "I want you to talk to these people and ask them these questions. Get them on the phone or go out and see them. Try your best to get a hold of as many of them as possible." Hanratty studied the list for a moment. "I think I'll drive out there and start going door to door." "How soon do you need this?" "As soon as you can get it. In the morning, we can talk about whatever you find out today." "Okay, I'll get started on this right now." Thursday night, Carrie came over to the apartment and made lasagna. I sat and watched as she prepared the dinner and thought about how much I loved her. I knew that I had been wrong to suspect that Carrie might have been cheating on me, but that wasn't enough to get us back together. I had hurt her with my distrust and accusations. I was going to have to give her time to forgive me, but I had the feeling that it wouldn't be much longer before we would be back together. While we ate, I asked Carrie about work. She told me that she was spending most of her time working on real estate deals. I wanted to ask her about the real estate deals she was working on, but that wouldn't be fair. The reason she was at my apartment was so that we could work on repairing our marriage, not be questioned about a case I was working on. "Are you still meeting with the school board planning committee on Wednesday nights?" "Yep, every Wednesday." "Making any progress?" "Actually, yes. The board is finally moving forward to put a bond referendum on the ballot in November." "How much are they going to ask for?" $500 million. "Wow, why so much?" "They estimated it would cost $200 million to purchase the land at the Fort Broderick State Park and another $300 million to build 3 schools on the site." "So they are going ahead with the fort site?" "Yes. That's what Mayor Gargas and Superintendent Kelly have wanted all along. Most of the holdup was from a couple of board members that wanted to build out west of the city. It seems that this has been going on forever." "How long has the board been fighting over the location for the new schools?" "This started before we moved here," Carrie said. "What do you think of that decision to put the schools on the fort site?" I asked. "You know that I was against the fort site, but why should they listen to me? I just try to stay out of that battle. They should listen to you because we will have kids going to school here someday, so what we think does matter." Carrie smiled at me. "I hope so. You know, if it were up to me, I would have chosen the site out west of town. That's all farmland owned by a few dairy farmers that are going out of business. The money they would have gotten for the land would have been a big help to them. Giving $200 million to the state doesn't help anyone. We would lose a beautiful park to build 3 schools that could have been built someplace else. That's interesting. I never thought of it that way, I said. I know this isn't interesting to you, but you don't have to make fun of me, Carrie said. I am not making fun of you. I know how hard you have been working on this, and I would never poke fun at what you do. The rest of the evening was filled with pleasant conversation. As Carrie prepared to leave, I said, "Next time I cook dinner at your place." "No, I am not ready to have you at the house yet." "Why?" "It would be too hard for me to send you home after dinner." "And that's a bad thing?" "I'm just not ready for that yet." It was Thursday afternoon. It had been just over a week since I asked Hanratty to contact the people on the list I gave him. He had finally managed to contact everyone on the list. He had no idea what I was looking for, but it was obvious that he knew the information he gave me was important. He could see how it all tied together. You know, getting this information was like pulling teeth. "These people didn't want to talk to me about this," Hanratty said. "They had been told not to tell anyone about the deals." "So, what do you think is going on?" "I am not sure. This all looks legal, but I just sense that there is something sinister going on here. 2 of these deals haven't been completed yet," I said. "I am going to keep an eye on these and see what happens." "What do you want me to do?" "Have you talked to Ross about this?" Hanratty smiled. "I told Ross that you were looking to reopen the investigation into Donald Boland's death." "Why did you tell him that?" "When I looked at this list, I noticed that the only address missing was 5219, Hanratty said. "I wasn't sure if there was a connection or not, but I didn't feel comfortable telling Ross that I was contacting all of these people, so I feed him the idea about you still trying to prove that Boland was murdered." "Good job. You'll actually make a pretty good cop someday." "Will I be as good as you?" "Oh, no. But you might be better than Ross," I joked. "What did Ross say?" "He was pissed. He was almost foaming at the mouth when he said, 'That was a suicide.' Maybe that will keep him off the scent for a while. If he asks you for an update, tell him I'm not making any progress." "Will do." I was supposed to have a dinner date with Carrie that night, but she had called to cancel. She said that she was going to have to work that evening. She said it was a real estate deal, but that was all she could tell me. Carrie was planning to go to Philadelphia to visit her parents over the weekend, so we had to plan our next date for the following Thursday. At 8:30 that evening, I drove out River Road and parked in the driveway at the Boland's house. From there, I was able to watch the activity around 5107 River Road. 5107 River Road was the home of William and Carolyn Patterson. From where I was parked, I could see Carrie's car parked in the Pattersons' driveway. The car in front of Carrie's appeared to be Stephen Farlow's car. I had not followed Carrie out to the Pattersons' house, but I knew she would be there. Well, I didn't know she would be at the Pattersons' house, but I was pretty sure she would be at one of 2 addresses on River Road. Like I said, I wasn't following Carrie, but her car helped me locate the house I wanted to watch. Carrie and Farlow were in the house for nearly an hour. When they came out, Carrie got into her car and drove away. I didn't move. It wasn't Carrie I was interested in. I assumed that Carrie would be headed home anyway. I waited until Stephen Farlow pulled out onto River Road and headed north into the city, and then, staying well back so that he would not spot me, I followed him. Farlow drove to the Brodericksburg Inn. I gave him 10 minutes to get inside before I got out of my car to follow. My hope was that Farlow was there to meet his client, the one putting options to buy on properties along River Road. My thinking was that Farlow's client might be responsible for Donald Boland's death. There was no way I could go into the bar and not be recognized. My hope was that Farlow and his client would just ignore me. After all, they had no reason to believe I was interested in what they were doing. When I walked into the bar, there were only a few people there, and Farlow was not among them. Shit, I lost him. "Hey, Hobbs, how you doing?" It was Ralph, the inn's bartender, that spoke to me. I was trapped. I couldn't ignore Ralph. I wanted people to think I was just there to have a drink, not because I was following someone. I walked over to the bar and sat on a stool. "I'm doing okay, Ralph. How are you?" "Couldn't be better. What can I get you?" "Give me a Yingling." When Ralph brought my beer, he asked, "So what brings you out here tonight? Don't usually see you here without your wife." "Carrie had to work, and I just needed to get out of the house." "Glad you came in. It has been slow tonight." "I thought Thursday nights is when all of the movers and shakers came out here," I said. "That is why I came here. I wanted to drink with the rich and famous." I was joking, but I hoped that I might be able to get some information from Ralph. I hoped that he had seen Farlow come through and might mention that without me having to ask too many questions. "If that's what you were looking for, you picked the right night, but you were too late." "What do you mean?" I asked. "The rich and famous were here for dinner, but they left a few minutes ago. I wasn't sure if the information would be helpful, but I asked anyway. Who did I miss? Congressman Freewater, Mayor Gargas, George Kasparek, Glenn Buskey, Robert Kelly, and Richard Mitchell were here for dinner. I felt a cold chill run through my body. The significance of these people being together was not lost on me. The fact that Richard Mitchell, Carrie's boss, was there really bothered me. I am sorry I missed them. How long ago did they leave? They left just before you came in. Mr. Farlow came in, and then they all went off to one of the meeting rooms upstairs. Trying to keep the excitement I was feeling out of my voice, I said, "Sorry I missed them. I would love to have gotten their autographs." Ralph laughed and then said, "You can always come back next week." Why? Well, they meet here every Thursday. They don't always have dinner first, and not all of them come every time. The congressman only comes once in a great while, but the rest are here every Thursday. I call them the Thursday Night Club. Ralph wandered off to take some drink orders, and I thought about what I had just learned. I was beginning to see the full pattern, and it scared me. These men were powerful, and I didn't have evidence that they had broken any laws. For the first time since I started investigating Commissioner Buskey, I felt like I was in over my head. I was just finishing up my beer when I felt a hand on my shoulder. "So what brings you out here, Lieutenant Hobbs?" Captain Ross said. I lied. I was on my way home from the gym and decided to stop in for a beer. "What brings you here?" "I was supposed to meet some friends here, but I guess they didn't make it yet. Can I buy you a beer?" I asked. "No, thanks. I need to make a call to see what's keeping my friends. In that case, I am going to head home." Ross moved over to where Ralph was mixing a drink, and I put $1 on the bar for a tip and got up to leave. As I walked away, I heard Ralph say, "They're already upstairs." When I got to the door, I looked and saw that Ross had taken a seat at the bar. I guessed that he might be the sergeant-at-arms for the Thursday Night Club members. I decided to keep what I had learned at the end to myself until I could decide what it all meant. It might have just been a meeting of friends, although I doubted it. I also wondered how Ross fit in. Was he a member of the Thursday Night Club, or was his appearance at the inn just a coincidence? My original investigation of Commissioner Buskey had taken a strange turn and was now overlapping my investigation of Mr. Boland's death. I didn't sleep very well that night as I tried to understand how the different players fit in. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had put things together in my mind in the only way they seemed to fit. I still needed a couple more pieces of information to confirm my theory. The problem was that even if my theory was correct, I still didn't know how I could prove that anyone had broken the law, and considering who I was dealing with, I had better have lots of proof, or I would be the one in deep shit. When Hanratty came in Friday morning, I didn't mention anything about my being out on River Road the night before or anything that had happened afterward. I was sure that Captain Ross would want to talk to him, and I wanted Hanratty to be able to truthfully say that he didn't know what I was up to Thursday night. The morning was pretty much routine. Hanratty suggested we hit the streets, and we did. After breakfast, we cruised by the schools, and then checked out a couple of items that had been on the OAR that morning. When we got back to the station after lunch, I went to my desk to make a phone call, and Hanratty disappeared for a while. Pennsylvania Department of Parks and Recreation, Peter Alston speaking. How can I help you? Mr. Alston, this is Lieutenant Hobbs of the Brodericksburg Police Department. I was wondering if you could answer a question for me, I said. I'll try. If the city of Brodericksburg wanted to buy some land that is a portion of one of our state parks, how would they go about it? I really don't know. I have never heard of that happening before. I think you will need to ask Mr. Ressler. He is the head of Pennsylvania's Department of Parks and Recreation. Unfortunately, he is out of the office today. He should be in on Monday. Can I have him call you? If you would, I said and gave him my cell phone number. Hanratty came over to my desk as soon as I put the phone down. Ross was all over me, Hanratty said. He asked if I knew why you were at the Brodericksburg Inn last night. I told him I wasn't sure, but I thought that you might have been meeting Carrie there for dinner. Good. What did he say to that? Bullshit. That's all he said? Yep, he is a man of few words, Hanratty said. So, you got anything else for me? Not right now, let's take a ride. We can take another pass by the schools before 3 o'clock. The weekend was uneventful. Carrie called me from her parents' home on both Saturday and Sunday evenings. The residents of Riverview Apartments played volleyball again on Sunday, but I didn't play. My ankle was feeling a lot better, but I wasn't ready to put that much stress on it yet, so I sat and watched, and later I took a dip in the pool. It was raining Monday morning when I got to the station. Chief Paziak was in his office early and flagged me down as I passed by. Just wanted to let you know that Agent Van Horn was in again. I believe he thinks we are not doing anything about Commissioner Buskey. I assured him that we have investigated the matter thoroughly, and as soon as we can prove any wrongdoing, we will go to the DA for an indictment. Do you think he bought that? No, I don't think he has a lot of confidence in you. Well, screw him. What has the FBI done about CSC? Nothing. I know what Agent Van Horn is up to, and I don't see any reason I should be in any hurry to help him. I am certainly glad I was able to cheer you up this morning, Chief Pasiak said as he laughed at my anger. So where do we stand in the investigation? This may be something bigger than just a bribery scandal involving the Commissioner of Works. I am waiting for a phone call that might answer the last of my questions. Until I get that answer, I am not ready to say anything more. Okay, Brian. Hopefully it won't be much longer. I would like to get this behind us before the end of the year, the chief said. Me too. Hanratty was waiting for me at my desk. Saw you meeting with the old man again. Ross isn't in yet. Should I tell him about your meeting when he gets in? Yeah, that should get his day off to a good start, I said. Are you ready to hit the street? Hanratty said. I am always ready for that. Hanratty and I got back to the station at 12:30 p.m. Ross was sitting in his office, and I saw him give Hanratty a little nod. As soon as we were past the office, Hanratty said, I think the captain wants me to stop by for a chat. Go make his day, I said. When I got back to my desk, I placed a call to Mrs. Boland at her daughter's house. Mrs. Boland, have you by any chance remembered the name of the man that called your husband about selling your farm? No, I am sorry. I wish I could be of more help. Do you think that you might recognize the name if you heard it? I don't know, I might. Okay, I am going to mention some names, and you tell me if any of them are familiar. Okay. Glenn Buskey? No, I know Glenn and his wife. It wasn't Glenn. Carl Gargas? The mayor? No, it wasn't him. How about Robert Kelly? No. George Kasparek? Kasparek? That might be it. Yes, I think that was the name. Kasparek, Mrs. Boland said in an excited voice. Does that help? Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Did he have something to do with my husband's murder? I don't know yet, but I am going to find out. It was 3:15 when Alan Ressler called me back. Mr. Ressler, what I am trying to find out is how a city can go about buying land that is part of a state park. Can't be done. The only way land from a state park can be sold is if the legislature approves the closing of the park. At that time, the land would be put up for public auction. Do you happen to know if anyone from the city of Brodericksburg ever contacted your department to ask about the possibility of buying land that is part of the Fort Broderick State Park? As a matter of fact, I do remember that. It was my first year as head of the department. I don't remember the man's name, but I remember that he said he was the superintendent of schools in Brodericksburg. Robert Kelly? Yes, I think that was his name, but I can't be positive because it was about 6 years ago. He asked about buying 300 acres of the park. He said he wanted to build a 3-school campus there. What did you tell him? Same thing I told you. There was no way we could sell him that land. Would you happen to have a record of that call? It would be in my calendar notes in the archives. It would take a while to find it. I am not sure if we will need your notes, but I'll let you know, I said. You have been a big help. Thanks. I was feeling a little apprehensive as I left the station that evening. I was in the middle of a big mess, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of it. I decided that it was time to lay the whole thing out for Chief Pasiak, and I planned to do that later in the week. I was staring into my nearly empty refrigerator when the phone rang. I was hungry and debating what to do about dinner as I picked up the phone. Lieutenant Hobbs, what do you want now? I said as soon as I recognized the voice. I just want to tell you what your wife is up to tonight. And what is she up to? She is meeting her lover tonight. They will be at 37 3rd Street at 8 o'clock. Why should I care? Because she is making a fool of you. She is telling everyone that you are getting back together soon, but she has no plans of ending her affair with him. So, who is this lover of hers? I asked, not expecting an answer. His name is Glenn Buskey. The Commissioner of Works? I don't believe that. Didn't you get the pictures I sent over to your office today? No, I didn't get any pictures. Well, you'll have them tomorrow, but why wait? If you want to catch your cheating wife in the act, just be there at 8 o'clock tonight, the caller said and then hung up. I almost laughed. Apparently my mysterious caller didn't know that Buskey was a closet homosexual. I did wonder about the pictures she mentioned. I looked at the clock and it was 7:30 p.m., so I picked up my keys and headed out of the apartment. I was about 2 blocks from my apartment when I saw him. I was being followed. The driver obviously had been trained in how to tail a car, but not well enough to fool me. He stayed back behind a couple of other cars, but I immediately noticed the way he moved around in his lane to make sure he could keep me in view. I drove down 4th Street and turned right onto Allentown Road. About a mile down Allentown Road, I pulled into a small shopping center and parked in front of a Rite Aid drugstore. I got out of my car and went into the store and peeked back into the parking lot. My tail had pulled his car into a spot directly in front of the store about 3 spaces to the right of where I had parked. The driver didn't get out of his car. He knew I would have to come back out, so he was going to wait for me. I walked to the back of the store and spoke to Bill Gleason, the pharmacist, who just happened to be a friend of mine. Bill led me through the stockroom and let me out the back door. From there, I worked my way around the right side of the building to the front. I peeked around the corner. His car was the second one in from the corner. There was no one in the first car, so I bent down and moved over to the car closest to me and worked my way around behind it. Then I crawled up between the cars until I was at the passenger side door of the car that had been following me. The driver had made the second mistake of the evening. His first was to think he could follow me without being spotted. His second mistake was even bigger. He was sitting there with his windows opened. I didn't know if the door was locked, so as I stood up, I reached inside the car and opened the door from inside. Almost before he realized what was happening, I was sitting beside him. "How are you this evening, Agent Van Horn?" Agent Van Horn had turned to look at me as soon as I started to open the door, but it was too late for him to stop me. "What the hell are you doing?" was all he could manage to say. "Just thought I would make things easier on you. I am heading over to Dominic's on Seneca Street for dinner. What are you doing in my car, and what are you talking about?" "Come on now, Agent Van Horn. We both know that you're following me, so don't try to pretend that you aren't. I just thought that rather than taking a chance on losing me, you might rather join me for dinner. That is if you like good pizza." Angie set the pitcher of Yingling on the table and asked what we wanted to order. "How about a large pepperoni pizza?" I said and looked at Agent Van Horn. He nodded his head and Angie headed back to the kitchen. As soon as she was far enough away from the table that she wouldn't hear our conversation, I turned to Agent Van Horn and said, "Let's get the formal introductions out of the way. I am Detective Brian Hobbs of the Brodericksburg Police Department." I could tell that Agent Van Horn was still embarrassed that I had caught him following me. "I'm Kyle Van Horn. I am a field agent out of the FBI's Philadelphia field office. Tell you what, I'll call you Kyle, and you can call me Brian. That work for you?" He agreed, but I could tell he didn't like it, or maybe it was just me he didn't like. He just stared at me as I pulled the pitcher over and started to fill our glasses. "Okay, Kyle, would you like to go first? Why were you following me?" I could tell that Agent Van Horn was not used to being the one being questioned. "I am not at liberty to say," he responded. "Okay then, why don't I tell you what I think is going on, and then you can correct me if I am wrong." Van Horn didn't respond. "I'll take that as agreement," I said. "I am guessing that this all started because the FBI was investigating a company called Comprehensive Supply Corporation. The FBI had reason to believe that they were bribing government officials to help CSC win contracts to provide automotive parts and supplies to government agencies. As part of this investigation, the FBI had an agent or agent spy on CSC's activities at the Automotive Aftermarket Products Expo last October in Las Vegas. During their surveillance, the agents observed Glenn Buskey, Commissioner of Works for the City of Brodericksburg, interacting with representatives of CSC on numerous occasions. It was the belief of the agents involved that Mr. Buskey was probably in violation of several laws regarding relationships between government officials and vendors. "How am I doing so far?" I asked. "Am I supposed to be impressed by that?" "All you did was repeat back to me what I told your chief back in February," Van Horn said. "That's true, but I am just getting started," I said. "The rest of this is what I have since figured out. It is my belief that you were one of the agents, if not the only one, that was in Las Vegas watching over CSC. After spending a week watching them, you had no hard evidence that they had broken any laws while they were at the show." I could see that Agent Van Horn was getting uneasy, which told me I was on the right track. "When you got back from Las Vegas, your superiors either decided to put the CSC investigation on the back burner or to close it down completely. My guess is that the FBI knew what CSC was up to but decided that the investigation and prosecution would be too costly and time-consuming to pursue. You didn't agree with their decision, so you decided to keep trying to nail CSC. In order to prosecute CSC, you would need to get someone who actually accepted bribes from CSC to help them win contracts to testify against them. Your problem was that the CSC investigation was closed, and you had no authority to investigate further. So out of the goodness of your heart, you decided to turn over the information you had on Commissioner Buskey to the Brodericksburg Police. Ever since your meeting with Chief Paziak back in February, you have been waiting for us to indict Commissioner Buskey. I have to admit, it was a good plan. We indict Buskey, and the next day you show up to offer Buskey a deal. The FBI will grant him immunity from prosecution in return for his testifying against CSC. With a live witness ready to testify, the FBI would certainly reopen the case against CSC, and you would be the hero. As to why you were following me, my guess is that you were becoming impatient with how long the investigation was taking, and you were losing confidence in the ability and/or willingness of the Brodericksburg police, and me in particular, to investigate one of our own city officials. Now what do you think? I asked. How the hell? He muttered. How could you know all of that? I am a detective, was my response. Any questions? What do you have on Commissioner Buskey? I told Agent Van Horn what I had found out about Commissioner Buskey's trip to Vegas and that CSC had given him $10,000 while he was there, but I couldn't prove it. How do you know all that? I have an informant. Can I talk to your informant? No, I wasn't going to give him Stephen Farlow. Why? He is part of a much larger investigation I am working on. I could see that Agent Van Horn was getting pissed. Listen, Lieutenant Hobbs, this case is important to me, and I will need Buskey to make my case. I told you to call me Brian. I would like to help you out, Kyle, but I care more about solving a murder than I do about whether Brodericksburg buys its automotive replacement parts from CSC or someone else. I am not prepared to talk about the investigation I am working on yet, but if I am right about what is going on, I may be able to give you Commissioner Buskey and maybe even a bigger fish. That got Agent Van Horn's interest. What can you tell me about your other case, Brian? I can't say anything now, but hopefully in the next couple of days, I will have it all figured out. I could see that Agent Van Horn didn't like that answer, but just then our pizza arrived. So, what gives here? What do you mean? I asked. For starters, you have a police chief that seldom puts in more than 6 hours a day at his job, and then there's you. You only have 5 years on the force, and you are already a lieutenant, and you're in charge of the homicide squad. Why would Brodericksburg even have a homicide squad? I admit I may have underestimated you, but that doesn't explain everything. I have to say that I am surprised that an agent of the FBI hasn't done his homework, because if you had, you would understand all of this, I said. If you had done your homework, you would know that only 2 police officers on the Broderick Police Department have ever been wounded in the line of duty. Of the 2, only Chief Pasiak was wounded while serving on the Brodericksburg Police Department. 16 years ago, then Captain Pasiak was wounded while stopping a man from killing his own 6-year-old son in front of the boy's mother. The shooting happened in front of the elementary school the kid attended. The chief was shot in the chest, and the bullet nicked his spine as it exited through his back. The chief still managed to disarm the man and hold him until help arrived. Chief Pasiak still suffers back pain from his injury and finds it difficult to sit at his desk for long periods. That is why he comes in late and leaves early, but don't mistake that for him not doing his job. He works from home when he is not in his office. The chief is a hero in this town, and his is a good cop too. As for me, I spent 7 years on the force in Baltimore. I made the homicide squad in my 2nd year and made lieutenant after 6. How did you get into police work in the first place? Agent Van Horn asked. I grew up here in Brodericksburg. I graduated high school when I was 17, and I didn't have enough money to go to college, so I joined the Army. During my first week of basic training, I was approached by the provost marshal at Fort Leonard Wood. I think it was my 6'2", 185-pound build that interested him. He asked me if I had ever considered being in the military police. Bottom line, he talked me into becoming an MP, and I got an opportunity to work with the criminal investigation team for a couple of years. I liked it. How did you end up in the Brodericksburg Police Department? I got wounded trying to break up a domestic dispute, so my wife didn't want me to be a cop in a big city anymore. Carrie was more important to me than the job, so we moved here. But why Brodericksburg? Like I said, I grew up here. When I was tailing you earlier, how long did it take you to spot me? Agent Van Horn asked. I had you almost immediately. As soon as I saw that blue Malibu behind me, I knew you were following me. How did you know my car? I'm a detective, remember? Even if I didn't know your car, I would have spotted you by the way you were driving anyway. Oh, yeah? How can you be so sure? Training. Training? You're going to have to explain that, Agent Van Horn said. While I was an MP, I was given the opportunity to be a driver for American diplomats and high-ranking military officers in Europe. That sounded like a great job to me, so I took it. During my training, I thought I would end up in London, Paris, or Berlin. I was 20 years old and was excited by the idea of living in one of the capitals of Europe. It turned out that the job was more than just being a driver. I had to have small arms and martial arts training. The driver training included aggressive driving techniques and evasive maneuvers. It didn't take me long to figure out I was not only to be a driver, but also a bodyguard. But I was still going to be in Europe. Instead of going to London, Paris, or Berlin, I got Athens, Greece. Still, I thought Athens would be great, and the city was, but the job was much more dangerous than I had expected. At the time I was stationed in Athens, the terror outfits known as November 17th was active. Their penchant was to kill diplomats or military attachés. The modus operandi was to attack their targets when they were in their cars going to or from work. My driver training had included how to spot a tail, and that training saved my life at least twice. I had learned to keep one eye on the road ahead and the other in the mirrors. I became very good at it. I still do that when I am driving. You said that being able to spot a tail saved your life a couple of times. Does that mean you saw some action? Yes. What happened? Agent Van Horn asked. I wondered if he was really interested, or if he was just trying to win points with me. You really want to hear this? Absolutely, he said, and he sounded as if he was really interested. Okay. The first time was pretty routine. I had just picked up the lieutenant general that served as the military attaché at the U.S. Embassy from his home. As we pulled away from the curb, I spotted a black Renault that had been parked behind us, pulling away from the curb at the same time. I kept checking him in the mirror and noticed that every time we changed lanes, the Renault also changed lanes. When he made his move, I was in the left lane. The Renault was about 3 cars behind us when he pulled into the right lane and accelerated hard and quickly closed the gap between us. I was behind a car, so I could not accelerate, so as the black Renault came alongside of us, I slammed on my brakes and turned the wheel hard left. My car did a 180 and I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The black Renault tried to follow but was hit by the car that had been behind me. What happened to the people in the Renault? Don't know. I didn't hang around to find out. My job was to get the general to the embassy, and that's what I did. What about the second time? The second time was really interesting. I was driving the CIA station chief from a meeting at a hotel back to the embassy. The car, a white Mercedes, pulled out of a side street and fell in behind me. There was nothing terribly suspicious about them other than I tended to keep an eye on any car that was close enough to be a threat. We had gone about 2 miles when 2 motorcycles appeared behind the Mercedes. I had noticed that the motorcycles had come up on the back of the Mercedes at a high rate of speed, but then made no attempt to pass the white car. That bothered me. We had gone a short distance farther when the Mercedes accelerated past me and then slowed in front of me. We were approaching a major intersection and the traffic light had just changed to red. The driver of the Mercedes had slowed gradually so that I was close to the back of his car, giving me very little room to maneuver.